little bit of rain.
Okay, literally camera died. Other camera died during the middle of all that. Hey guys! So in a few days, Polar Seal will be leaving on its third Atlantic crossing, but this time will be a little bit different because I will be taking the boat solo as opposed to the last two times where it's been Sophie and I or Sophie and I and crew. In this video, we're going to talk about all the aspects and preparations that Sophie and I went through to get the boat ready for solo. Everything from sail plans, cockpit configurations, to safety, sleeping at night and watching out for other ships, to meal preparations. We're going to cover it all. Now, just a disclaimer, this will be my first solo passage, so I don't claim to know it all, and this is just how I have chosen to prepare. I'm going to do a follow-up video to this one, and I'm sure I'll have some different views when I finish. So you may be asking yourself, why would you pick a big ocean crossing to be your first solo experience? And that's a really good question. The reality of it is, Sophie and I have some good experience crossing oceans, most of which has been short-handed, but there's really two reasons that we picked this route. So for this trip, we're going to be leaving from Lanzarote in the Canary Islands and going to Antigua in the West Indies. And the winds on this route are generally from the same direction, so I should have them from the northeast when I'm leaving the Canaries, and they will be coming down as we go towards Cape Verde, and then slowly turning from the east and coming straight from the east as I'm kind of about the same latitude as the West Indies. The other really nice thing about this route is pretty much from the Canaries all the way to the West Indies, you have about a knot of current, which will help our overall speed. So that's something I tend to forget, but it is there and it will help us along. The second reason is because of the shipping traffic. On this particular route, we'll be away from a lot of the general shipping traffic as opposed to the North Atlantic routes, which are in the middle of a lot of traffic between Europe and the United States. So I expect that we won't run into many ships along this passage. And for example, when Sophie and I did it 2 years ago, we saw 2 ships in 17 days. It's not a lot, 2 ships. I'm sure a lot of you want to know what kind of modifications we made to Polar Seal to make it easier to navigate on your own. The good news is because Sophie and I have done so much short-handed sailing, the boat is generally set up pretty well for solo sailing. Over the years, we have configured the boat so that we can maneuver the boat with only one person on the deck, and that is to allow the other person to be able to sleep. Generally, Polar Seal is quite ready for solo sailing. And the first thing that we need to make sure we've done is have all the lines run back to the cockpit so that we can maneuver it and control it from back here. The only exception to that is our whisker pole, which we'll talk about a little bit later. For this passage, we're going to keep the sail plan fairly simple. Now, 95% of this passage is going to be downwind, so we're going to rig the boat for that. We'll use the mainsail above, which has 3 reefs in it, and we do have the boat set up that I can reef by myself from the cockpit, even going downwind, so that's really nice. So on our first Atlantic crossing from east to west, Sophie and I used a twin headsail setup, so we had 2 Genoas on the same furler and had them both pulled out, and it acted like a big kite to pull us along the Atlantic. That setup was okay, it was a little clunky, and it really took 2 people to operate, especially when reefing. So on our second Atlantic crossing from west to east, we used just the mainsail and the headsail. It was our old 100% jib with a pole on it, and that worked generally okay, but the sail was older and very baggy. So now on this trip, we're going to use a little bit of a hybrid. We're going to use our mainsail again, and then our new sail, our new head sail, which we got from Precision Sails, which is 110% jib. And the advantage of that is the sail area is just a little bit bigger and it's going to hold a little bit better shape. So when we're going downwind, we should have a little bit more speed, and that will make things a little bit more comfortable. Now let's talk about the Autopilot. So Sophie and I have done a lot of short-handed sailing, and for us the Autopilot has always been extremely important. It will be even more important while I'm out soloing. So really what we're talking about here is redundancy of the Autopilot. So for our primary autopilot, we have a Raymarine Evolution autopilot, which is an electric autopilot that we have installed in the boat. And then as a backup, we have an older Raymarine autopilot that we have on a switch, so we can very easily switch over between one and 2 in case one fails. So if any part of our autopilot fails, we have a backup. So if the computer fails, we have a switch to switch over to a second computer, or if any part of the mechanical system fails, such as the drive unit, we can just take that out and replace it with a new one. A lot of people, especially solar sailors, choose to install wind vanes on their boat, which are mechanical autopilots. There's no electronics involved. They essentially set the angle of the wind. There's a big rudder of the water, and it holds a course based on that. These devices are expensive, and they take up a lot of room in the back of the boat, and that's one of the reasons that Sophie and I have chosen not to install one. Further to that, Sophie and I usually sail with at least 2 of us, if not more, so there's usually a second set of hands to steer if that needs to happen. Now, if I were going to do a lot of solo sailing, I would probably choose to install one, but since this seems to be maybe a one-off trip, we're going to leave it with the electrics. Well, hopefully this is one-off trip.
Well, you tell me.
Now let's talk a little bit about our new electronics, which we installed from Ray Marine a few months ago. Now, I think it's safe to say that you shouldn't rely 100% on electronics on board. However, I think without these, I'd be much more hesitant to go on this trip. So our chart plotter here will be able to show us AIS targets. Now these are ships that have some type of a transmitter on it that can tell us the ship's position, heading, and speed, and that can tell us the closest point of approach between our 2 vessels, what time that will happen, and how close we will get. So that's really important information. The chart plotter can also show us radar picture, and the radar can show us objects or ships that may or may not have AIS, but it can also show us squalls with precipitation in it that may be coming at me. Also very important to have both of these, and it's going to create a whole picture about any collision risks that are out there. So we have a chart plotter here, one in the cockpit, and we can also repeat the chart plotter image on a tablet that I can take with me anywhere at the boat and have it with me at all the time. So on this chart plotter, we can set different guard zones that will sound an alarm if an object or a ship enters it. So we have some for the radar and some for the AIS, and we can do it at different nautical miles. We can do it just in front of the boat. We can do it all the way around the boat. So essentially these sets of alarms will be a set of eyes for me while I'm asleep. And that makes this equipment act as a second crew member for me. There.
Okay, great.
So you're probably wondering, how am I going to sleep on this trip? And to be honest, I'm kind of wondering that myself, because I've never done this before. But the way that I'm thinking about it is that I will generally go to sleep at night and do maybe 1 to 2 hours of sleep, and then get up and check around and make sure the sails are okay and the traffic situation's okay. I plan on sleeping here on the settee so that I can see out into the cockpit, but also the chart plotter at the nav table. So if any alarms go off, I'll be able to hear them and quickly react. I see 2 different patterns that I'll be having during this trip: coastal sailing and the ocean sailing. So when I leave Lanzarote, I'm going to be more coastally sailing because I'm going to be sailing close to islands and between other islands. And for that, I'll need to be awake quite a bit more. So I plan on sleeping in the cockpit and waking every 15 to 20 minutes to make sure nothing's around. Because in this area, there's a lot more fishing boats and other ships that may not have AIS or may not have a very good radar signature. So my own eyes are going to be the best deterrents. When I get away from the islands, the mode will shift more into ocean sailing, where it's going to be larger ships, all with AIS or big radar signatures. And I'm going to go more into a 1 hour to 2 hour sleep cycle, and then get up and check around, make sure the sails are okay, and the traffic situation's okay, and then go back to sleep. So obviously this is all going to depend on the sailing conditions I have, and it's going to be a little bit of trial and error, but I'll let you know how it all works out when I'm on the other side. So obviously for this trip, I'm not going to have Sophie with me or her amazing cookies. Or her amazing cookies.
Oh, you like my cookies?
I do like your cookies. So we've done a few things differently. The first is we've provisioned less because it's only 1 person on the boat. Although, based on the ship's listing to the port, I'm not sure that that's actually true. So for this passage, we focused a lot on foods that require very little preparation or cooking time to get ready to eat. A lot of chips and nuts and snacks. So I have cooked a bunch of food ahead of time. Sophie helped with cooking a bunch of food ahead of time. We bought a bunch of frozen meals, got some freeze-dried food, and then a lot of snacks to fill in the voids along the way. I put together a small meal plan, which is very basic and just consists of the foods that are available for breakfast, like breads and eggs and porridge, Then lunch, which consists of tacos and soups. And then dinners like the heavy lasagnas or, well, my favorite, the pineapple chicken and rice that I make. So when we're offshore, whether it's just Sophie and I or us with a crew or me sailing solo, there's actually a lot of people behind the scenes that are there to help us make a trip successful. And that's our shore support. I'm gonna have Sophie there to be overall moral support and general coordinator, my buddy Andy Shell, who's there for anything boat related, and my mental health. Our weather router Charlie, who can get me through pretty much anything, and then one of my best and oldest friends, Steven, who helped us a ton with our prior passages and I know can find anything on the internet if I have a question. For communication with our shore support and also to get weather updates, which is super important, we used to only have one satellite device, but we learned the hard way on our last passage that it's best to have redundancy. So for this trip, we're going to have our trusty Iridium Go, which is really more for data communications. We get all of our weather and emails on this, but we can also do phone. The second device we have is our Garmin InReach, and this was our backup on our last Atlantic crossing, and it was really hard for us to get activated. The other problem with it is while it works well, it can only do 160 character text messages to get information, and that's a little bit hard when you're trying to troubleshoot or get weather information. So, because of that, we've acquired this Iridium sat phone. So think if this Iridium Go fails, I'll resort next to the sat phone and just give Sophie a call and ask her what's up, or give Charlie, our weather router, a call and understand what's going on. This might seem a little bit extreme, but we've had experience with one of these devices failing, and really what this is for is Sophie's peace of mind while I'm out there.
There will be no sat phone failure this time.
Unless the satellite network goes down. So let's talk about safety for a little bit. Safety on board Polar Seal is always our #1 priority, and nothing will change about that with me going solo. The reality of it is, a person falls overboard in the middle of the ocean, even with crew, it's like falling off a 1,000-meter cliff. So the #1 rule aboard Polar Seal is to always stay on the boat. No falling overboard. The odds of recovering somebody is about 1% with somebody on the boat. With me going solo, the odds of recovery are 0. So I will continue to wear my life jacket like I always do in the cockpit and on deck. Will always be tethered, with the harness on, which you can't see. With the harness on. Tethered to the boat and always holding on. For Sophie and I in our life jackets, we have these MOB-1 man overboard devices. So if we fall in and the life jacket expands, it activates a device, which sends a signal to our VHF, hopefully waking up the other person, but also makes a mark on the chart plotter where we are. For me going solo, that device does nothing because there's nobody on the boat. So for this trip, I bought a PLB-1, which is a little personal locator beacon. Think of it as a small EPIRB. So if I fall in, it will send a signal over the satellites and over VHF to the search and rescue coordination centers. And maybe I'd have the possibility to have a ship come find me. I should have a couple of buddy boats around. There's always other sailboats crossing the Atlantic, and we know of a few that are leaving around the same time I am. So there is a chance that there will be a boat somewhat close to me in case the worst should happen. But mostly if I fall overboard, I'm fucked. And it doesn't matter if I'm alone or if there's other people on board. If you fall overboard in the middle of the ocean, especially at night, you're probably fucked. Well, that was joyful. I think it's safe to say that as long as everything is going well on this trip, I shouldn't have a lot to do other than eating or sleeping. But if you've watched any of our past crossings, you'll know that I get a little bit anxious and I suffer from a little bit of boarditis, if you will.
Bored of what?
A boarditis. It's like I'm bored and it's a sickness. So I have come up with a few things, care of Sophie, to help keep me busy. And the first is going to be this magic device, which I know you've all seen me on a lot. But we've downloaded a lot of music, much beyond, 80s hits and country icons that Sophie got stuck with because she forgot to update Spotify before our first trip. And then I also bought a number of books. A lot of these are about polar exploration, which is something I'm really interested and fascinated about. So I'll have some physical books to read, have some movies to watch, and probably a lot of self-reflection. Maybe some quizzes from Jules and Tenny. So let's get into the most exciting question of them all. what is Sophie going to be doing while I'm gone? What are you going to be doing, honey?
I will be back in Paris. I choose Paris because I have a little bit of family there, but also because it is convenient for me to fly out of. And I'll be establishing the Shore Support HQ at the little office where I usually sit. And I will be following every single move. I think that this video may come out by the time you're still out there.
That'd be cool.
So yeah, if you want to follow Ryan's adventure, go to ryanandsophie.com or follow us on Instagram at Ryan and Sophie Sailing. We are on the topic of shameless plugs. This beautiful shirt that Ryan is wearing is available for sale on the website. How exciting is that?
But what is this shirt, Sophie?
You can't give the answer. We are not giving the answer.
Okay.
If you know, you know. Alright guys, we hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you make it to the other side. High five. Good luck. Do not fall overboard. Rule number 1.
Don't fall overboard.
Do not fall overboard. Good luck, honey.
Thanks, honey.
Will you miss me?
Yeah, I'll miss you.
What will you miss?
I'll miss all your nice smiles and hugs.
Oh,
And kisses.
love you.
What will you miss about me?
No, I really miss doing the crossing. It's like
Yeah.
a big sacrifice for me not to come. Like I'm giving
True.
you that one. Now
True.
you owe me.
Okay. Bye-bye!